That thing you love, sir.
Well, campaigners who want buffer zones around abortion clinics to prevent vigils and other sort of demonstrations outside them, I mean, are gaining ground. I mean, the media is totally in their pocket. Just whatever they say goes straight into the media. And the vigils themselves are normally organised by an organisation called 40 Days for Life. And their guidelines are that people gather, they pray, they will only speak to someone if they're spoken to, so they're not addressing the public. They will have messages on placards, but they're very gentle, so things like pray for an end to abortion, ask me about my abortion, we can help, things like that. But the campaigners in favour of buffer zones have to demonise them by making them sound like, you know, an intimidating mob shouting at people as they're going into clinics or whatever, which is just complete hysterical nonsense. Now, John Mason, SNP MSP, has been speaking some common sense on this issue and saying these vigils are actually nothing like the way they're portrayed in the life fests in the Scottish Parliament. I mean, one MSP said that these vigils were violently preventing women accessing healthcare. I mean, that's not exaggeration, it's downright lie. Emma Roddick, SNP, MSP, you lied in the Scottish Parliament. You lied, and you know it, and you're sticking to your guns. Absolutely disgraceful. Anyways, yeah, so John Mason has spoken some sense. I mean, my point I'd make to John Mason, I'd say, but in the last election, the SNP had this in their manifesto, and you were encouraging people to vote SNP. So you've encouraged people to vote for the party that will introduce buffer zones. So I would argue it's then a bit late to be saying, oh, we don't really want buffer zones, because you've urged people to vote for them. But that's that. Anyway, so that's a bit of background. But then today, these two gentlemen arrived outside an NHS facility in Glasgow.
But we are his children, and therefore, if one unjustly takes the life of
apparently
another,
this is
then the
all
blood
allowed
of
to
the
happen.
innocent
This is
will
within the
cry
law.
out unto God,
This guy can shout
and the blood of the innocent
at a healthcare
will
setting
cry out
at Sandyford
unto
Central.
God. This is the
He can
blood
just do that,
of the baby's bride,
and the police can't do anything about it.
God's holy, just and righteous. I mean,
Holy, just and righteous giving cancer to children when they're alive. Giving cancer to children.
That thing you love, sir.
Oh,
Sin.
sorry, what is your jacket made of?
What?
What's your jacket made of?
It's
Is it
funny.
mixed violence? What is
red
a
herring.
fucking sin under the Leviticus?
I've never heard that one before, sir.
Oh, I'm sure you have.
Do I look like a Jew?
Do you look like a what?
Do I look like a Jew
That's in the Old Testament.
who was given to the Jews?
Oh, right, okay, so the
Look, you guys are not going to do anything about this. Open anti-Semitism.
You covered Christian.
No, nothing.
So you've decided just to ignore the bits that don't match what you
No,
like.
sir. We can actually take the Bible in context, and we can separate
So you take it
ceremonial
in
law
context.
from.
You just caught a snatch of a bit of debate with someone there. They were trying to take the line that you wear a coat made of two materials, but the Old Testament law says you shouldn't do that, so you're a hypocrite defending the lives of unborn children. I mean, let's suffice it to say that's a very low level of intellectual engagement with the subject, and let's just leave it there. When he says, you know, I'm not a Jew, they're trying to accuse him of anti-Semitism, which is obviously just completely laughable. But that's just a debate going on. Right, the placards they've got there, one of them uses the word murder. Now, personally, I don't use the word murder with regard to abortion, because technically the definition of murder is usually illegal killing. Murder's not illegal, so technically speaking, it's not murder. I would rather just refer to killing. If people use the word murder, you know, I'm not saying they're wrong, but it's just not the tone or whatever I choose for myself, but that's what they've chosen. So who are they speaking to? They're obviously speaking to the NHS staff, maybe the NHS in general, the government, but generally activists and protesters. They go to the place where the thing is happening. If you're an environmentalist objecting to a forest being cut down, you'd obviously go to that forest, go to where the diggers are, go to where the people with the chainsaws are. You might go to the parliament as well, but going to the place where the thing is happening is just a normal part of activism. I mean, the gentleman there, people are saying he was shouting. I'm not sure I'd say that was shouting. He's raising his voice in the way you would to be heard out of doors, but he wasn't being threatening or aggressive at all. So he's speaking to the staff, speaking to passers-by as well. We'll hear the message, speaking to the government. But what about women who might be going there for an abortion? That's what people say is the really sensitive issue. Now, I would suggest, in terms of the message, if I was doing that thinking, right, this is potentially for people women who are going for an abortion, then I wouldn't want that sort of style of message. Probably, I think the 40 days for life approach is much better. But I think people should be free to even approach people on public land whenever they want to and say, could I speak to you about such and such an issue? Or if the person just says no thanks, then you have to leave them alone. Having said that, they're quite sort of in-your-face, hard-hitting placard that they've got there. Might that actually be effective in some situations? Maybe it would. Maybe that would be the thing that makes someone think, oh, wow, maybe I need to have a think about this. Maybe someone going for abortion or someone working there or just a passerby. I don't know. But it's worth bearing in mind now that hardly anyone goes to an NHS facility for an abortion. It's generally an at-home thing now, pills at home. And we hear as well about, what if about rape victims? The assumption being that the best thing for rape victims is abortion, which I would question. I'm not sure in the long term that is the best thing. Treatment, it's not a form of treatment, that's the way it's called. I'm not sure it is the best road for rape victims to go down, having an abortion. Now, with this sort of issue, I'll try and think about some parallel issues to try and clarify my thinking, to make sure I'm not treating this as a special case. I thought, what would be a similar case? Although, how about if someone was outside an NHS facility giving out just things that were factually untrue? So giving out a leaflet that's got things about medical treatments, and what it's saying is just not true. Should that be allowed? Well, what about if someone's giving out, say, a leaflet that maybe the bare facts might be right, but they're being used to present an overall message that's very, very misleading? What should be done about that? I would tend to be of the view that you shouldn't ban that. You shouldn't ban it. You've got to counter it. So if you know that's the problem, then the NHS are going to make the effort to provide what they see as the genuine information on those issues. So I would tend to be against that. But I think that's a different case from this, because these gentlemen here are not presenting misinformation. They're not presenting factual information that there's some sort of scientific certainty that they're getting it wrong. Okay, it's not a scientific, it's not a medical point that they're making, it's a moral point, which is very different. Then I thought, in terms of it being a very personal thing, intruding on someone's personal difficulties, a sensitive time for them, I thought, right, how about a protest at a funeral, for example? Would that be out of order? Should that be illegal? Well, if it's a funeral like you see some of the ones, say, for an IRA man, when they're sort of glorifying their past, there's a however many gun salute, etc. Now, if that's going on at a funeral, I think it would be quite reasonable for people to, express another view and say they think this is wrong. They shouldn't be being glorified. So I think there'd be a case there. But if it was just a family affair, unrelated to any controversial actions of the person, then I'd suggest that that's probably not appropriate for there to be some sort of protest there. I don't know whether it should be illegal, but I think it should be, that would be inappropriate. But with an abortion clinic, that is where the wrongdoing is occurring. This is not the funeral of an abortionist. Okay, I think that would be a different matter. But this is the place where the wrongdoing is happening now on an ongoing basis. So again, I feel that it shouldn't be disallowed on the ground that this is, intensely personal or sensitive to certain people. Now, the two gentlemen we've looked at there at the clinic in Glasgow today, what they're doing is not in accord at all with the guidelines of the 40 Days for Life organisation. But for me, that's not the question I'm considering. Because the relevant question politically is, should it be illegal to do what they're doing? Now, I think it shouldn't be. But there's an existing law in Scotland, which I'm sure you're familiar with, which is a breach of the peace, which I think is quite a bad law because it's so broad and vague. It can be applied to all sorts of situations. But I'll read it to you. Oh, well, a quick summary. Conduct severe enough to cause alarm to ordinary people and threaten serious disturbance to the community. Conduct which does present as genuinely alarming and disturbing in its context to any reasonable people. Okay, cause alarm, threaten serious disturbance. Right, I mean, that conduct for those two gentlemen there, was it severe enough to cause alarm to ordinary people and threaten disturbance in the community? I would say not. But if they were behaving in a very aggressive manner, if they were screaming in people's faces, if they were blocking pavements, if they were being intimidating, then there's already a law that could be used to deal with that. So if these people outside abortion clinics, if they were actually behaving in the way that the MSPs and the campaigners try to claim that they are behaving, there is already a law to cover that. So why can't the police do anything? Well, generally the reason is because what they're doing isn't causing alarm and threatening serious disturbance. Okay, so therefore the existing law doesn't apply. If they were behaving the way that they claim, then the police would be able to do something, which I think would be perfectly fine, because people shouldn't behave like that. One of the problems with the breach of the peace legislation is it becomes a bit of a mob veto system. So if someone does something, if you just get a few people to come along and start really kicking up a fuss and making a real fracas, then the police could say, oh, this must be a disturbance of the peace because it's causing a disturbance. So you end up, any mob that turns up and kicks up a fuss creates the disturbance and therefore results in the police shutting up the people who are actually behaving quite reasonably. So there's a bit of an issue with that law. So basically the existing law is ready, has the power to deal with unreasonable behaviour were that to occur. Now I'd imagine seeing those two gentlemen outside the abortion clinic in Glasgow today, a lot of people who might have pro-life views, maybe including a lot of Christians, they might look at it and think, oh dear, how embarrassing, how awful that they're behaving like that and being so direct and blunt about it. Well, I suppose the challenge I might give to those people is, what's your strategy in the pro-life cause? Because for a lot of people who are pro-life, including a lot of Christians, their strategy seems to be to vote for parties that will continue abortion, then do nothing in terms of pro-life activism, but criticise pro-life activists for not quite doing it right. So those two men in Glasgow, are they undermining the case of 40 days for life against buffer zones? Yes, they are, a little bit. Their style there, I'm not sure about it, but maybe, in some cases, maybe that will be what gets through to people. That's up to them. But I say to anyone who's going to criticise them, if you spend 99% of your energy fighting the evil of abortion in our society and you've got 1% spare to criticise other pro-life activists, then I'd say that's absolutely fine. But if you're more wound up by two gentlemen engaging in pro-life activism of a form that you're really not sure about, and if that's the issue foremost in your mind, then I'd invite you to reassess your priorities and think that the lives of unborn children should actually be at the top of the priorities. Now, these two gentlemen in Glasgow, the media are going to have a field day. The campaigners are going to have a field day about it because it's actually given them some footage of showing people, speaking out loud and holding a placard that's a bit hard-hitting. So it'll be everywhere. It'll be all over the media. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a BBC report. I wouldn't be surprised if it's spoken about in the Parliament. But the main thing I'll say at the end of this, whatever happens with buffer zones, that's a side issue. It's a side issue. The central issue is the value of human life, and that's where we need to keep our focus. So I thought you'd appreciate that little update. Do like the video, do subscribe as well, give your views in the comments below, and if you're not a member of the Scottish Family Party, do join up via the link below.